They used my money to book a luxury ski trip, private cabins, hot springs, even a snowmobile tour, and I wasn't even invited. Instead, they assigned me to babysit 5 kids while they enjoyed the view I paid for. Hi, I'm Lauren, a 33-year-old hospital logistics manager from Portland. For years, I was the go-to helper, the one who never said no, until this time I did something that left my entire family speechless. So what happens when the quiet one finally walks away? Stick around, because this story isn't just about family, it's about freedom. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. People used to call me dependable, reliable, steady. I wore those words like a badge until I realized they were just a polite way of saying, we expect you to say yes. It was a Monday afternoon in late July, and I was finishing the last 15 minutes of a virtual procurement review when my phone buzzed for the 3rd time. I knew without checking that it was from Emily. I'd seen the preview earlier, something about Minnie and a last-minute favor. When the 3rd buzz came, I muted my mic, sighed, and reached for the phone. "Hey," I whispered. Emily didn't waste time. "Can you watch Minnie tomorrow morning? I booked a spa session with Julie last minute, but I haven't had a pedi in months." There was no greeting, no question about my schedule, just the assumption that I, the single one, had time. I stared at the spreadsheet on my laptop, numbers blurring slightly from fatigue. I just returned from a 16-hour flight back from a medical supplier conference in Toronto. I hadn't even unpacked. "You don't have anything tomorrow, right?" Emily added casually. "You're always good with Minnie. She loves you." I could hear Minnie squealing in the background. I pictured her strawberry blonde curls, the glittery tutu she insisted on wearing even to the grocery store. I loved that kid more than I knew how to explain. But still, "I'll be there by 8, I said. My voice was flat, automatic, the way it always was. After the call, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. My apartment was quiet, neat, sterile. The faint hum of my dishwasher was the only sound. On the wall above my desk was a single photograph, Mount Rainier at sunrise. I didn't have framed family photos. I wasn't in most of them. Sometimes I wondered if anyone had noticed that. Growing up, I was the child who didn't make noise. Sophia had asthma attacks that sent Mom into a panic. Emily had reading delays that demanded weekly meetings with specialists. Me? I was given the house key when I was 9 and told, "You're grown now." Back then, I thought it meant I was responsible. I even felt proud. Now, I think my mother just needed someone off her list. At work, I was respected. I managed logistics for one of the largest hospital chains in the state. I scheduled air freight, negotiated contracts, managed 6 junior analysts, and led quarterly budget reviews. My job gave me structure, control, order. My family, on the other hand, gave me noise. Margaret, my mother, called every few weeks, not to chat, but to ask how soon I could come by to help out or pick up a cake or handle something that slipped Sophia's or Emily's minds. Dad rarely said much. He let the requests happen around him. Occasionally, he would look at me with what might have been sympathy, but he never stopped anything either. I remember once, for Mom's birthday, I woke up at 5 in the morning. I baked a cake from scratch, vanilla bean, her favorite, decorated it with pressed flowers. I picked up my nephews from daycare, wrapped Sophia's gift for her because she didn't have time. And when the party finally started, I was in the kitchen slicing strawberries. From the living room, I heard Mom say, "Lauren is always so thoughtful, so reliable." And that was it. No one came into the kitchen. No one said, "You've done enough. Sit with us." I was part of the machinery that made the celebration happen, but never part of the celebration itself. That night in July, after Emily's spa appointment had come and gone, I FaceTimed Sophia to check on her kids. I didn't expect much, just a quick call. But she picked up with a glowing grin and said, "Oh, hey, I'm so glad you called. We've been meaning to loop you in." I blinked, surprised. Loop me into what? She laughed, already distracted by something off-screen. We're planning something big for Mom's 60th, like huge. We booked Moonberry Lodge in Montana. Snow, cabins, hot springs, the works. I was about to ask when this was happening when she continued. We've already split up the tasks. Emily's doing decor, I've got activities, and we figured you'd help with the kids, right? You're amazing with them. I swallowed hard. You've already booked it? Yeah, she said, like it was obvious. Oh, and Mom would love it if you could chip in. It's a little pricey, but we figured around $3,000 from each of us. You're good for that, right? $3,000. That was almost a full month's rent in downtown Portland. I didn't say anything, not right away. My jaw locked for a second as I stared at the glowing screen, at Sophia's easy smile, the confidence in her voice. They'd planned everything. I hadn't even been asked if I wanted to go. I hadn't been invited. I was just expected to pay and watch the kids. Later that night, I sat alone on the couch with a glass of water. No music, no TV. I opened my banking app, transferred the money, and texted Sophia. Done. Let me know what else is needed. But as the confirmation screen popped up, I felt something twist inside me. I sat still for a long moment, staring at the numbers on the screen. And for the first time in years, a question bubbled up from somewhere I'd buried deep. What if, just once, I didn't? I didn't expect a spotlight, but I didn't expect to be seated next to the trash bins either. The room glowed in that late fall kind of way. Golden light seeping through the glass panels, white tablecloths catching it like warm linen lanterns. The Vineyard restaurant had that Instagram-perfect quality. String lights overhead, flickering candles in mason jars, and wine glasses that clinked like something out of a movie. It was supposed to be elegant, a celebration. I walked in alone, wearing a navy blazer that I'd steamed 3 times that morning. I'd curled my hair, even wore a hint of lipstick, a shade called Fig Whisper I hadn't touched since Sophia's baby shower. I hadn't come to impress anyone, not really. I just wanted to feel like I belonged. Lauren Chen, I told the hostess. She scanned the clipboard, then gestured. Right this way. The table stretched in a gentle U shape beneath a canopy of white grapevines. My name card sat at the far end next to the kitchen swing door. I blinked at it. It read, Lauren Chen +1, if real. I stared for a beat too long. The handwriting was unmistakably Emily's, looping and confident. It was meant to be a joke, probably, but it landed differently. I hadn't RSVP'd with a date, and I suppose that left an opening. Still, writing "if real" out in cursive was a choice. I slipped into the chair, the nearest one to the service station. Every few minutes, the door swung open behind me, letting out bursts of clattering pans and the tang of roasting garlic. The smell was comforting. The placement was not. Across the table, Sophia and Emily were already laughing with cousins, gesturing animatedly with champagne flutes. Margaret stood near the center, fixing napkin folds like she was hosting royalty. Victor, my father, nodded politely at guests but kept mostly to himself near the hors d'oeuvres. No one noticed I'd arrived. Aunt Lydia sat beside me, pearls too tight around her neck and an eye that rarely missed anything. She leaned in, breath perfumed with mints and Chardonnay. Still solo, huh? She said, too loud for comfort. You know, I told your mother once, Lauren's so independent she could throw her own baby shower. She laughed like it was the first time she'd said it. I smiled back, thin and automatic. That must have been a while ago. Oh, sure. You were what, 28? She took another sip of wine. But you're strong. That's what matters. Strong. Like a chair leg, like a door hinge. Functional, not something you toast. Margaret made her way around the table, topping off glasses. She skipped mine. Whether intentional or not, I couldn't tell. My glass sat empty while hers clinked against others with soft smiles and light applause. Everyone, she called out, raising her flute, thank you for joining us to celebrate the beautiful fall season, and of course our wonderful family. Emily stood beside her, beaming. And to Mom, who always puts us first, even when we don't deserve it. A chorus of cheers followed, and I lifted my empty glass out of reflex. No one noticed it had nothing in it. I watched them for a moment. They fit together, like links in a chain I couldn't quite attach to. My sisters talked about diaper brands and Montessori wait lists and someone's new Instant Pot. I nodded along when spoken to, but mostly listened. That night felt like standing behind a pane of glass, close enough to see, too far to touch. Dinner arrived. Plates clattered. The kids, dressed in miniature suits and sparkly dresses, darted between chairs, giggling under the tablecloths. Someone passed a basket of rosemary rolls, and I took one out of politeness. It was dry. Midway through the second course, Emily clinked her fork against her glass again. "Quick update," she said, grinning. "Sophia and I finalized the trip. We're heading to Moonberry Lodge next month. Hot springs, fireplaces, private cabins. It's going to be magical." The table buzzed with questions. "Which weekend? How cold is it up there? Can I bring my skis?" I blinked. Moonberry Lodge? This was the first I'd heard of it. Sophia added cheerfully, "We booked early. Amazing discount for large families. Plus the kids are so excited." I looked down at my napkin. Folded into a triangle. White cotton. Clean. Emily turned to me briefly. "You'll help with the kids, right?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. I folded the napkin tighter, watched the crease deepen. "When exactly are you leaving?" I asked finally, trying to keep my voice neutral. Margaret smiled from across the table. "Don't worry, sweetheart, we need you here. The kids adore you." My hands clenched beneath the table, fingers pressing into the stiff fabric of my skirt. There it was again, the role I never auditioned for but kept being cast in. Reliable, steady, present. They'd booked the trip, planned the activities, chosen the lodge, all without telling me. And now I was expected to stay behind and babysit, like the trip itself was a given, and my exclusion was just logistics. The swing door behind me opened again, a burst of steam hitting my back. A waiter rushed past with a tray of tiramisu. I sat still, wondering how long I could go on playing this part. You'd think if you paid for a vacation, you'd at least get a seat at the table. It was early December in Portland, and the rain hadn't let up in days. Thin streaks slid down the window behind my desk, blurring the high-rises outside like a watercolor painting left too long in the sink. I sat cross-legged on my sofa, a half-finished cup of tea going cold beside me, as my laptop glowed with rows of hospital supply budgets in the red. On my phone, the family group chat was alive, too alive. Photos of winter jackets, kid-sized boots, matching gloves in jewel tones, and a shot of a snow-covered lodge. Sophia had captioned it, "Mom's dream come true, counting down to the 12th. I stared at the screen. The 12th. They hadn't even asked if I was free that week. They had just assumed. Another message pinged in, a selfie of Emily in front of a mountain of wrapped gifts with the words, "Packing chaos, but worth it," beneath it. And then, from Margaret, "Don't forget, Lauren, block off the 12th to 18th. You'll have your hands full with the kids. Can't wait for Mom to finally relax." That was it. No please, no thank you. No offer, just a calendar notification disguised as a family message. I looked down at the spreadsheet on my screen. Numbers swam and shifted. I tried to focus, but a buzzing filled my head like a low-grade hum I couldn't turn off. I reached for my planner and flipped to that week. I had penciled in a trip to Colorado, a long overdue break I'd been quietly planning since July. Nothing extravagant, just a long weekend in the Rockies. Snow, hot cocoa, silence. Of course, that was before they claimed those dates, before I'd wired $3,000 like it was a utility bill. I closed the planner and leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. I tried to remember the last time someone in my family had asked me if I wanted something. Not needed, wanted. My college graduation flashed in my mind. I'd worked 2 jobs and still made the dean's list every semester. No one came. When I called home afterward, my mom said, "You've always been the strong one. We didn't think you needed anyone there." That sentence had stayed with me, not because it hurt, but because it felt like a life sentence. A ping. Sophia again. "Do we have enough sleds? Lauren, maybe you can grab some for the kids before we leave?" I didn't reply. I turned the phone over. I stared out the window, rain still tapping steadily. I thought about the kids, Jake and Sophie and tiny Minnie, who had started calling me Aunt Rain after I picked her up one day during a thunderstorm. I loved them. But love, I was starting to realize, shouldn't come with blind obedience. I closed the hospital spreadsheet and opened a browser tab. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Beachfront Resorts, California. I didn't think. I just typed. Photos loaded. Golden sand, wooden balconies, quiet decks with sunrise yoga. My eyes scanned a listing in La Jolla. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't outrageous either. Ocean view. Breakfast included. No family suites. No bunk beds. Just one large bed and windows that opened to sea air. I clicked through the images, one by one, not imagining myself there, placing myself there. Then I clicked book. A confirmation screen appeared. I didn't blink. I entered my card details the same way I'd sent the $3,000, but this time my stomach didn't twist. There was no numbness, just a small, steady calm. I stood and walked to the kitchen, washed my cup, boiled new water, made another cup of tea, this time stronger. I lit a candle I'd been saving for no particular reason. Lavender and sage. The smell filled the apartment like permission. I sat again on the couch and turned my phone back over. Messages kept pouring in. "Make sure you don't book any meetings. We're counting on you with the kids. Don't forget to rest up. You'll need energy." I opened my settings and tapped Do Not Disturb. I didn't write back. I didn't say no. I just stopped responding. I closed my eyes and let the stillness settle around me. No drama, no speech, no door slammed, just silence. And sometimes, that's the first true act of rebellion. No one ran after me. No one called my name. I walked out of that dinner, and for the first time, no one followed. When I landed in San Diego, I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow. But something shifted the moment the salt air hit my face outside the airport terminal. It was cool, but not sharp, soft around the edges like it had nowhere to be. The taxi driver didn't ask about my luggage, just loaded it quietly and played a jazz station all the way to La Jolla. The apartment I'd rented was small but full of light. White curtains, a tiny balcony, hardwood floors that creaked a little. No toys on the floor, no bottles drying on the counter. Just a woven rug, a potted snake plant, and silence. I unpacked slowly, one piece of clothing at a time. I didn't fold them into drawers. I draped them across the open shelves like I was letting them breathe, too. That first morning, I made coffee and sat barefoot on the balcony. Across the street, the ocean breathed in long, steady waves. There were joggers, people walking dogs, a couple pushing a stroller. I wasn't any of those people, but for once, I didn't feel like I had to be. I went to a yoga class on the beach that afternoon. The instructor spoke softly, like she was only talking to the air. When we laid in stillness at the end, I heard only the sound of waves and my own heartbeat. There was no toddler tugging my sleeve, no phone buzzing on the mat beside me. I stayed still long after the others left. The next day, I found a small bookstore tucked behind a surf shop. The owner was a woman in her 60s with hair the color of ash and the voice of someone who'd lived a whole other life. We talked about poetry. I bought a collection I hadn't heard of before. That night, I read until 2 a.m. I forgot what that felt like. To stay up late not because someone needed me, but because I didn't want to put the pages down. By the third day, I turned my phone back on. 58 voicemails. The first was from Sophia, her voice chirpy, then sharper. "Hey, where are you? We already dropped the kids off at your place. Call us, okay?" Then Emily. "Seriously, Lauren? This is really messed up. Everyone's asking where you are." One from Margaret. I don't understand why you do this. Your sisters are trying so hard to make this work. We trusted you. Then Aunt Helen. The eldest holds the line, Lauren. That's always been the way. Don't let this family fall apart. I didn't listen to all of them. I couldn't, but one stopped me. Jake, my nephew, barely 6. Hi, Aunt Lauren. We're waiting for you. I brought the green book with the pirate dog, remember? I sat on the bed, phone pressed against my knee, and let that message echo in the quiet. I missed him. I missed all of them. In a way I didn't know how to carry. But I couldn't go back. Not like before. I left the phone on the nightstand and walked into town. There was a gallery near the cove. Sunlight poured through the windows like it had been choreographed. I wandered through quietly until I paused at a photograph of a woman alone on a street in Florence, red scarf trailing in the wind. She didn't know the camera was there, a voice beside me said. I turned. A woman, probably in her 40s, stood next to me. Brown curls, linen shirt, camera strap slung across her chest. I was following light, not people, she added, but sometimes the right light finds both. We ended up talking for an hour. Her name was Marissa. She was a photographer who once spent 3 months in Italy by herself. No plans, no maps. I got lost a dozen times, she said, smiling, but I always found something better than what I was looking for. She didn't ask what brought me to San Diego. She just handed me her card and said, if you ever want to see Florence the way I did, call me. That night, I walked to the pier. I ordered a glass of wine and a bowl of clam chowder, then sat on a wooden bench with a view of the sunset. The air was turning cooler, and I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. I spotted a small silver jewelry stand on my way back. Nothing fancy, just a folding table with velvet trays and a handwritten sign, local, handmade, imperfectly beautiful. A bracelet caught my eye, thin, etched with the word Libertà, freedom. I bought it without thinking. Back in the apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my phone one last time. I didn't respond to the messages. I didn't argue or explain. I opened the group chat and tapped Leave Group. It didn't ask why. It just did it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. They used to call first. This time, they used a key I forgot they still had. I was in the kitchen steeping tea when the deadbolt clicked. At first, I thought I misheard it. Just the old heater groaning again, or maybe someone at the wrong door. But then came the unmistakable sound, the metallic scrape of a key turning, slow but deliberate. I turned toward the hallway just as the front door swung open. Margaret stepped in first, shoulders square beneath her tailored coat. Behind her were Sophia and Emily, red-cheeked from the wind, or maybe from whatever they'd rehearsed on the way here. No one said hello. I didn't move from the kitchen. Margaret's eyes swept the apartment like she was checking for damage. Then she looked at me, arms crossed. "How long were you planning to avoid us?" she asked. I didn't answer. They'd walked in like the place still belonged to them, like I was the one who needed permission to be here. I noticed Sophia drop her bag onto the armchair, my favorite reading spot, and stand with her hands on her hips, her stance already defensive. Emily was the last to enter. She stayed near the door, hugging herself, eyes flicking between me and the others like she wasn't sure where to land. "You left 5 kids without a word," Sophia said. "We stood at your door in the cold with backpacks and snacks and crying toddlers." I stirred my tea, the spoon tapping gently against the cup. "You made plans, assigned roles, and never asked if I agreed." "You always help," she shot back. "When did you become so—" She stopped short, as if the word was sharp enough to bite. "So what?" I asked. Emily stepped forward. Her voice wavered. "Cold. You didn't used to be like this. We counted on you. The kids miss you." I met her eyes. "I miss them too, but that doesn't mean I owe you my time. Missing someone and being used by them aren't the same." Margaret stepped closer now. Her voice was lower than the others, more dangerous for it. I never thought you'd turn into this kind of person, Lauren. You used to be the pride of this family." I took a breath. Let it settle. "If I was the pride," I said quietly, "why was I always the first to sacrifice? Why was it assumed that my time, my money, my peace were all negotiable?" Sophia's hands dropped to her sides. "We're all stressed. We all have kids and mortgages and jobs. You're single. You have flexibility. What's so wrong with helping your own family?" "Nothing," I said. "But this isn't helping anymore. This is expectation disguised as love." There was a long silence. Emily shifted uncomfortably. Margaret remained still. Then she said it. "I don't recognize you." I nodded. Maybe that's because I finally recognized myself. No one moved. The soft jazz playing from my speaker carried faintly into the room, an instrumental version of something they probably didn't recognize either. I'd left it on while making tea, a habit I picked up in San Diego. It helped soften the walls of my space, made the air feel lived in. Margaret exhaled through her nose, slow and disappointed. "If this is your choice," she said, "then I have nothing more to say." I looked her in the eye. Then for once, we're on the same page. Emily blinked fast, like she wanted to cry but couldn't quite decide if it would help. Sophia bent to grab her bag without another word. Margaret didn't touch her coat until she was already halfway to the door. They didn't slam it. They didn't shout. The door closed with a soft, final thud. I stood there, not moving, for several minutes. My tea had gone cold. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I didn't feel righteous or triumphant. I felt still. Eventually, I walked back into the kitchen, reheated the water, and made a fresh cup. I added honey this time. I sat by the window and watched the January light fade into the city skyline. The clouds had that heavy, bluish tint that meant rain was coming again. And then, softly, aloud, just for me, I said, "This time, I'm not cooling off." There was no apology, no grand gesture, just quiet, and it finally felt like peace. March had arrived gently in Portland, the kind of spring where tulips peeked out in front yards, and the morning light came in golden, not gray. I opened the blinds and stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching the soft sun warm the wooden floor. It had been 2 months since they came to my door. No one came after that, and I was still here, still whole, still breathing, still mine. The Florence itinerary was pinned to the fridge, right next to a grocery list and a magnet that said, "You can start over any time." I hadn't taken it down since I got back from San Diego, not because I needed reminding, but because it made me smile every time I passed it. The trip was real, and so was everything that had changed since. I watered the pothos hanging by the window, trimmed a few brown leaves, then leaned in close. "You're doing great," I whispered to the plant. Then I laughed. Maybe I was talking to both of us. I spent the morning baking a pie, just one, just for me. Apple cinnamon. No rush, no special occasion, no holiday potluck or surprise guest list. I played a jazz record while the crust turned golden in the oven. The scent wrapped itself around the apartment like a soft blanket. My phone buzzed. One new message. It was a voice memo from Jake. "We made cookies like you do, but they got kind of flat. Mom says I put too much butter. I miss you." I listened twice. Saved it. I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't care, but because I wanted to hold that moment without rushing to fill it. I sat down with a pen and opened the notebook I kept near the window. On the first blank page, I wrote the same question I'd started asking myself each morning. What do I want today? Underneath it, I answered without hesitation. A new passport stamp. I opened my laptop. Florence was waiting. The ticket prices hadn't changed much since last week, but I didn't shop around this time. I just booked it. Round trip, window seat, one checked bag. As I filled out the confirmation form, I scrolled past the emergency contact field. I paused. My eyes rested on the name that had been there for years, Margaret Chen. I hovered for a breath, Then I deleted it, not out of anger, just clarity. I left the space blank. Later, I found an old sticky notepad in the junk drawer, the kind I used to slap on the fridge when I had a roommate back in grad school. I peeled one off and wrote in simple, steady handwriting, "Welcome home, Lauren." I placed it on the kitchen counter, a note from me to me. No one else needed to read it. That afternoon, Marissa sent over the details of a photo walk she was hosting in Tuscany. I told her I'd join. No fanfare, just a "see you there." The day passed in pockets of light. I read. I napped. I sat on the floor with a mug of tea, watching dust particles drift through the sunlight like tiny confetti. I didn't miss the noise. I didn't miss the pressure. And I didn't miss the version of me who believed that love meant erasing myself. I opened the balcony door just before dusk. A breeze swept through, warm and faintly sweet, like the promise of something kind on the horizon. I stood there for a long time, not waiting, just letting the air in. And when I finally closed the door, the smile on my face didn't need an audience. This life, finally, was mine. I used to think choosing myself meant shutting others out. But as I stood there with the breeze drifting through my open balcony door, I realized it simply meant letting the noise fall away so I could finally hear my own voice. Sometimes, the most radical kind of love we can offer is the one we give ourselves, especially when we've spent a lifetime being told that love only counts if it's selfless. But love with boundaries is still love, and maybe the only kind that can last. If this story touched something in you, I invite you to share your own reflections. Maybe, like me, you're learning to rewrite what family means, one gentle choice at a time.